Okay, so now we're really going into the inner making of the human condition. And we spoke about the last theme was speaking about the worthless of worthless and the sinners of Israel. And we said that the worthless of worthless are people that are lowly. That's how they were created. But the sinners of Israel are actually people with tremendous potential. If you recall, we said that it's just that the potential is channeled in the wrong way. But if we could use this potential and channel it in a good way, they would become the greatest of the greats. We quoted the Talmud that says, "Kol hagadol mechavero yitzro gadol emeno." Whoever is greater than his fellow, that also means that his evil inclination, his animal soul, is also greater. And that's why sometimes these great people fall into the traps of the animal soul because they have such a great animal soul. But if they could channel all of that energy into positive directions, then they would become the greatest of the greats. The sinners of Israel really tremendous potential. This is why also Kabbalah teaches that, you know, Isaac and Rivka had two sons, Esav and Jacob. And it says that Isaac loved Esav. Why would he love Esav if he's portrayed as truly a wicked man? And the answer is because Isaac knew this truth. He saw the tremendous potential that Esav had in his own son. And he wanted to cultivate it. He wanted to help direct it. Because if he could, then he would become even greater than Jacob, who was the holy one of the sons. So we find that all over history, and we find that in society too. But that is where we left off. Now we're going into the Kabbalistic way of looking at these types of souls. Does anyone want to read? Bottom of page 101, as Margot just mentioned. Anyone? Are thus endowed. So we
I'll
talk
read
about the
Jovial.
worthless of worthless men and the sinners of Israel that are endowed at the time of marital union. Go for it.
Okay, I'll
Please.
read.
Yeah.
August and Dad at the time of marital union with, at any rate, a nefesh to nefesh of Malchut Asiyah, royalty in the world of action, which is the lowest grade of holiness in the world of Asiyah. The world of Asiyah is the lowest of the four worlds of Asilut, Berea, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. In Asiyah itself are the 10 Sifriot, the lowest of which is Malchut, kinship. In Malchut itself are the three levels of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, the lowest of which is Nefesh, in which there are Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, the lowest level being Nefesh, which is Nefesh to Nefesh of Malchut Desiyah.
Right. So just to explain, I know these are very, very big Kabbalistic,
Yeah.
and we'll soon get also to what happens during marital union. But in general, there are four worlds, as we've spoken about in the past. The lowest of the worlds is the world of action, which is this world right here. That's why the focus here is on action. What does it mean that it's the lowest of the four worlds? It means that godliness is concealed in this world. That's why the word for world in Hebrew, olam, comes from the word le'alim, concealment. Olam means concealment. Um, and that is because God comes in a concealed way. Um, in many ways, this is also the task of every one of us to reveal the God that is concealed in this world. How do we do so? Through action, through mitzvahs that are action oriented. Most mitzvahs are action oriented. And this is why, again, this world is called the world of action because it's the action, the good action that we do that reveals the godliness that is concealed in this world. That explains the world of action, but and our task in it, our general task in it. But now we're going into the layers of this world. So every world has 10 sephirot, the 10 divine attributes that many ways activate it, enable it to be. Now, the lowest of the 10 sephirot, the 10 of the attributes, by the way, there are three intellectual ones and seven emotional ones. The lowest, which is an emotional one, is Malchut. Malchut is kingship. Kingship means, also refers to the way we deal with this world, but kingship means that we have full control and authority over our own selves, our own animal soul, first and foremost. God expects us in this world because this attribute is so revealed in this world to be kings and queens. Being kings and queens doesn't mean that we have scepters and royal crowns. Being kings and queens means that we are king and queens up here, that we're able to control our emotions, to have full authority over ourselves in the way God wants us to have authority, and in many ways to be representatives of the King of Kings. We're the kings that work for the King of Kings, God Himself. Now that's the Malchut. That's that aspect to this world. Now, in addition to that, okay, now a deeper layer, and I'm skipping a few things here, and if you have questions or comments, please feel free to mention them. But in addition to that, we also have the 5 layers of the soul that we function with in this world. Every one of us has a soul, and every soul has 5 layers. The deepest layer is the Yechida Shebanefesh that we've spoken about many times. And that's the layer that cannot be contaminated, that always remains connected to God. That's the layer that gives us hope, that no matter how much we've fallen, we can always rise back because there is a part of us that never gets tarnished, that is always divine. And that's the part that can activate the rest of the parts, the rest of the 4 layers, even when we fall low. Now, the 5th level of the soul, the lowest level of the soul, is nefesh. That's the part of the soul that interacts with this world. And because it interacts with this world, it can be affected by this world. Uh, that's the part that speaks to us emotions, to our feelings. We're not robots. At the end of the day, we are affected by that which happens in the world, and that which happens around us, that which happens in our own lives. But it's not the yechida that is affected again. That never gets contaminated. It's the opposite. It's the nefesh that gets affected. The nefesh that is interacting with the world all the time. That can get tarnished. That can get stained. That can get affected. Anyway, just as it is in the world below here, in our own world, so too it is in the world above. God also activates or communicates through those levels of the soul. And in this world, the nefesh, the one, again, the part of the soul, the 5th layer of the soul that gets affected by this world, is very much connected also to the malchut, the kingship, the part of us that needs to have authorship or authority over the animal soul. It deals with the animal soul, like the nefesh. That's why the nefesh and the malchut are very much connected. It deals with the animal soul. It deals with the temptations. It deals with everything that may stand against God. But the nefesh deals with it, or we hope it deals with it, with the malchut, with kingship, so that at the end of the day, it might be affected by it, but it's certainly not defined by it, because it's in control. It's a king over all that which affects the nefesh. I hope that was clear. I hope that gave us a sense, at least, of how we interact in this world and how God Himself interacts in this world. But again, the most important thing to remember, just for this part here, for the bottom of page 101 of chapter 18, is that we are multi-layered. There are many dimensions to the human beings. The dimension that has to be activated in this world is the dimension of nefesh. We can't just lock ourselves up in our room all day long and not go and activate or interact with the world. The part that interacts with the world is the nefesh. That's why it has to be activated. When it is activated, let us also activate the malchut within the nefesh, which means the kingship within that part that interacts with the world. Because then we allow ourselves to remain in the driver's seat, to have full authority over the animal soul and over all that it entails, so that we don't become too affected by it, and certainly we don't define ourselves by it. When we interact with the world with this level of kingship, of authority, of self-control, of the ability to remain above, to remain royal, even though we might go within, we might go low, that gives us the strength indeed to overcome anything that may, but will not, contaminate the nefesh. So that's what this part here is saying. Just to give maybe an example to it, I don't know if I've shared the story, but Passover is coming up. One of the great Hasidic Jews in our generation was a man that we mentioned many times, Mendel Futerfas, um, that I had the privilege of meeting many times. Mendel Futerfas was a man who really was royal, had this malchut that did not affect his nefesh, even the lowest part of his soul. And in his last year on planet Earth, the doctors told him, look, Mendel, you're a sick man. Passover is coming up. Don't drink the 4 cups of wine. It won't be good for you. And obviously, you don't listen to the doctors, whether it's good or not, whatever. But he wasn't affected by this world again. He was a king. By the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz would often say that he also doesn't listen to the doctors all the time. And doctors here don't take this personally. But I asked him, why don't you listen to the doctors? Rabbi Steinsaltz once told me, he said, because when I go up to the heavens and God will tell me, why didn't you listen to me? I'll tell God, don't take it too personally. I didn't listen to my doctors either. So that's okay. But in any case, Mendel Futerfas drank those 4 cups of wine. And at the end of the Seder, he was on his couch. He couldn't even get up and he needed to go to the bathroom. So his wife says to him, what happened to you, Mendel? He said, I drank the 4 cups of wine. And she was very upset. She said, look, listen to the doctors. This is your health. You can't do this. And he said to her, look, for 86 years, that's how old he was. For 86 years, I laughed at the world. Because I had to fulfill Torah. And by the way, he was in Siberia, in the Gulags. You think that now I'm going to give in to the world? You think now I'm going to give in to the limits of this world, to the within? I'm staying above. I'm staying a king. And if that's a good story, because he wasn't listening to the doctors, but it's the approach that I want to emphasize. And that is that, we get affected by the world. We get affected by the news. We get affected by people's interactions with us. We get affected by business, by our professions. We get affected by our children. We get affected by all sorts of things. But the point is, again, not to lose it, to remain malchut, so that the nefesh doesn't get contaminated, because it can. Yechida can't, but the nefesh can. And this is what really this is referring to. The nefesh of malchut, the asiyah, malchut of this world. In upper worlds, things function differently there, because there's more divinity, there's more revelation. But that's the idea here. Now, there's tremendous influence on that kingship, on the ability of us to really be in control during the marital union of our parents that create us together with God, obviously. And this is where we're going to that what we're going to speak about. But let's open this up. If there's any disagreements, comments, questions, please feel free to speak up. As always, shouldn't be just a monologue. No? Okay. So let's continue. Bottom of page 101. Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, parents pass along their characteristics to their children. If the parents are frivolous and sinful, the child will follow suit. Nonetheless, even with parents like these, lacking heaven-oriented sanctity at the moment of conception, as well as in whatever education they gave their children, a holy spark passes from them to their offspring. Perhaps a child's soul is the lowest of the low, a nefesh to nefesh of malchut de'asiyah, but it's still a soul of holiness, a dwelling for God's light. Every Jew, no matter how lowly, still enables the channeling of Jewish potential to his progeny, regardless of his personal state and unawareness of this transmission.
Okay, very good. So I want to explain. So the Talmud says in the Tractate of Kiddushin that there are 3 partners to every human being, not just 2. 3. His father, his mother, and God. Shlosha shutafin la'adam. By the way, sometimes couples have to remind themselves of that, because we love to not only plan, but to be obsessive with our plans. This is how it should be for our children. This is how it should be in the household. This is how it should be in life. And we think that we have full control of our homes, of our children, over our lives together. But we have to remember there's a 3rd partner. Sometimes the 3rd partner doesn't agree with your plans. And if you only look at your partnership, you and your spouse's partnership, and you think that you are the only ones, then you'll get very frustrated. There's a third partner. God partners not just at the time of marital union to create this child, but all the time. It says that the famous Talmudic line also from the Tractate of Shabbat that says that the man and the woman really have the same names. We both have fire, esh, within our names. In the word man in Hebrew, you have esh. The word man is ish. Aleph and shin are in that name. Almost sounds the same. Ish, esh. Esh means fire. And in the word woman, isha, you also have esh, aleph, shin, which also means fire, right? The only additions in the words of man and woman is in the ish. You have a yud, you have an aleph shin, which spells fire, but you also have a yud, which is one of God's letters. And in the isha, you have just one additional letter. You have an aleph shin, fire, but you have a hey, right? Which is also one of the letters of God. And God says, if a man and a woman, if a husband and a wife have merited, then God dwells in them. The yud and the hey are there. But if not, then God says, I don't want to be a part of this partnership. So God leaves. And then what happens? If the yud and the hey are taken away from those names, ish and isha, the yud from the ish, the man, and the hey from the isha, the woman, if they flee away, you're left with only fire. And then the Talmud says, then fire consumes them. Fire consumes them. But that's why it's so important to remember that there's a third partner, God himself. I do that in counseling sometimes. You have a man saying this and a woman saying this, and they fight. And then I bring in a third chair and I say, well, let's ask God. Let's see what he says. He's also a partner. But I think it's a good idea for every spouses to not just know this, but to incorporate that. But in any case, so God comes and participates in the creation of man. Without God, man can't be created. The Talmud further says that the father and the mother create the body, God creates the soul. And of course, without a soul, the body can't live. Now, the man and the woman have an impact on the type of creation that will come from them. And if the source of that creation is impure, is lowly, then it can impact eventually the creation that will come from them because it's coming from a source that's lowly. But even though the father and the mother may be a lowly source, and that's why, by the way, there's books and books, and there's laws, halachot, on how to behave, even what to think about during marital unions. It's considered to be a very important topic in Jewish law, in Jewish tradition, as opposed to how the world sees marital unions. We see it as a very bodily, very vulgar act, the opposite. In Judaism, this is the holiest act because God comes into the picture. It's the closest you can get to God. But even though the parents may be lowly and therefore it can affect the quality, so to speak, of the child that is created from this lowly source, still we have to remember that God is also a partner in this creation. And God can do anything. He can make this creation the highest of creation, even though the source is lowly. That explains why there are many great people in history that came from lowly sources, as opposed to, and it's true the other way around. There are many, because at the end, God is in control. There are many wicked people that came from great sources. We just spoke about Esav at the beginning. Esav was wicked, and he came from Isaac and Rebekah, the two very righteous people. So at the end of the day, that third partner is the deciding partner. Now, what this is saying is that because God is very much involved in the creation of human beings, even though people may be lowly, there's this divine creation within them. There's God's participation, and God's participation is the most dominant one, as we just mentioned. And therefore, no human being should see themselves or others as too low or too incompetent or too unable to achieve greatness. Because at the end of the day, you have that holy spark, as he calls it here, this divine soul that is created from God. Every Jew, no matter how lowly, still enables the channeling of Jewish potential. This is what this is saying here. Because God is that third partner. And it's true for many people that I know, and I've spoken to many people like that, unfortunately, but they've been deeply affected by their parents, sometimes by the divorce of their parents, sometimes by the quality of their parents. And they almost consciously or subconsciously ask themselves, what will be of me? Look, I come from the source. And I think this part of the Tanya is just so eye-opening because it tells these kids, listen, you have a divine soul. There was a third partner, a dominant one, much stronger one than your parents. And your soul, by the way, comes from that partner. So don't define yourself by who your parents were and trouble that you went through. Fine, I understand. That's also part of creation. But God is infinite. So focus on that. And just as we have to focus on that for ourselves, we have to focus on that in others also. So that's what happens during this marital union and thereafter too. But again, please feel free to speak your minds.
Yes, Rabbi, I have a
Yes, please.
question.
Please.
Uh,
Yes, Kim.
yeah. Why would God leave a marriage? You mentioned that when you were talking about the union.
What would he leave a marriage like and then allow the fire to consume them like we were saying?
Yeah, yes, yes.
Look, I think first of all, God doesn't leave totally, but he says, you know what? There's no room for me. You're not letting me in.
Hmm.
Just like it is with egotistic people. It's not that God leaves them. They're still alive. God still gives
Right,
them
right.
everything they need. But God says, your ego is too big. You're not letting me in the room. And so it is with marriages sometimes. There's so much chaos there where that doesn't allow for God to come in. So God says, all right. It's not that God purposely leaves marriages. Not at all. He doesn't purposely leave a marriage. And by the way, he never fully leaves a marriage, but in that sense, right? It's just that he's almost banished from the marriage. It's almost like, let's say you have a guest at home and the host, the father and the mother or the husband and the wife completely ignore the guest. At one point, the guest is going to say, I don't feel welcome here. I'm going to leave. I'm going to let you do you. But no one's giving me any attention here. Same here. And God is much more than a guest.